Hello, welcome to the new episode of Creative Thought Labs, and today we are going to discuss about reincarnation. What is reincarnation? At its simplest, reincarnation, also called rebirth or transmigration, is the belief that some non-physical aspect of a person survives death and begins life again in a new form. That can mean rebirth as a human, as an animal, a deity, or another kind of being depending on the tradition. Different religions and philosophies describe how this cycle works and what purpose it serves: punishment, learning, karmic justice, or spiritual evolution. The term and the idea aren't limited to one religion. Verses appears in Indian religions, in Asian Mediterranean thought, and in some Jewish mythical traditions, and in modern spiritual movements as well. Have you ever wondered what happens when we die? Not the immediate lights out stuff, but the big question: does something of you continue? Perhaps in another life, another body, another time. Today we are diving into one of the humanity's oldest ideas, reincarnation, the notion that life is a loop, not a line. We'll explore ancient teachings, modern research, philosophical puzzles, and why even now the question still matters. Why does this idea of rebirth keep showing up across cultures and centuries? There are few likely reasons. It answers anxieties about death, provides moral continuity, and your action matter beyond your present life. And it gives a framework for suffering. Bad things can have a cause in the past lives, and present effort can shape your future lives. In many societies, this belief is woven into ethics, laws, and societal structure, not a fringe theory, but a core world view. Let's talk about the historical roots. Let's back up to history. Reincarnation in its developed form is deeply rooted in South Asian religious thoughts. The earliest hint appears in some late Vedic and Vedantic texts, but the doctrine becomes central in the classical Hinduism, Jainism, and Buddhism. In those systems, the cycle of repeated birth and death, called as saṃsāra, is typically tied to a law of moral cause and effect, karma. Liberation, then, is escaping the cycle, called moksha in Hinduism, nirvana in Buddhism. Outside India, variation appeared in ancient Mediterranean among Pythagoreans, Orphic groups, and later in some strands of Christian and Jewish mythical thoughts. In modern times, the reincarnation was picked up by spiritualists, theosophists, and New Age thought, often in hybrid form. Let's talk about Hinduism. In Hindu thought, the central idea is that eternal self, Atman, undergoes cycles of rebirth. Karma, the ethical law of cause and effect, explains the circumstances of each rebirth. Good actions tend to yield happier futures. Harmful actions lead to suffering. The moral thread connects lives and gives purpose to ethical behavior. The choices you make now affect your future embodiments. But Hinduism isn't a single voice. Schools differ. Some emphasize devotion, others knowledge, others ritual. The shared concern is liberation, ending the wheel of saṃsāra. Texts like Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita explore these themes, blending metaphysical claims with practical spiritual paths. Let's talk about what Buddhism thinks about reincarnation. Buddhism takes an unusual and subtle stance. It firmly teaches rebirth, yet it denies a permanent, unchanging soul, ananta, or no self. According to canonical Buddhist thought, what continues is not an immortal soul, but a causal stream. a set of conditioned processes that gives rise to new being. The analogy is often used is a flame passing from one candle to another, continuity without a single unchanging thing transferring. This solves an important philosophical tension for Buddhists: how to have moral continuity across lives without posting an external self. Buddhist rebirth is thus rational, relational, and processual. Karma shapes tendencies and future conditions, and the goal, nirvana, ends that cycle by removing ignorance and craving. The emphasis is practical, freedom from suffering rather than metaphysical proof. Now let's see what Jainism has to offer. Jainism offers yet another take. It too affirms the soul as eternal, undergoing transmigration based on karma. Jaina ethics are famously strict. Non-violence and asceticism are central because karmic practices stick to the soul and must be shed to achieve liberation. So, while the broad theme rebirth and liberation is shared across Indian schools, the metaphysical details and ethical implications differ significantly. Cross-cultural and Western appearances. Outside South Asia, beliefs in repeated lives show up in surprising places. Ancient Greek philosophers such as Pythagoras and Plato entertained metempsychosis, transfer of the soul. In Jewish mysticism, medieval Kabbalistic teachings developed doctrines of Gilgul, soul cycles. And in 19th-20th century, European spiritualists and theosophists mixed Eastern ideas with Western occultism, helping carry reincarnation into Western popular imagination. So even where it's not mainstream religious doctrine, reincarnation has been influential in cultural ideas. Modern scientific interest, why scientists looked at reincarnation. Now, turning to modern research, reincarnation is primarily a metaphysical or religious claim. That said, for decades, a small number of researchers have tried to study reports of past life memories empirically. Their aim isn't to prove immortality philosophically, it's to investigate anomalous claims methodically. Cases where young children spontaneously report memories of previous lives, sometimes with verifiable details. The best known investigator in this field is psychiatrist Ian Stevenson and his successors at the University of Virginia. Now let's look into Ian Stevenson and the US studies. Ian Stevenson began collecting and investigating thousands of cases where children, often between the age of 2 and 6, described detailed memories of another person's life. He and later other researchers documented cases in multiple cultures, recorded statements, and where possible, matched a child's claim to a deceased person. In many cases, there were intrigued specific names, places, cause of death, and even scars or birthmarks on the child that match wounds on the deceased. Stevenson published extensive case studies and several books detailing these findings. Stevenson's work was careful in method. He recorded interviews, sought confirming documents and witnesses, and tracked cultural context. His team at the University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies has continued the research. Later researchers like Jim Tucker continued systematic follow-ups. One recurring statistic from the program: a sizable minority of cases show birthmarks or defects that corresponds to injuries of the claimed deceased person. These points don't settle metaphysical questions, but they do make the phenomena worthy of study. What the cases actually show. Important nuance. These studies document anomalous reports. Children saying things they seemingly shouldn't know, or having physical marks that correlate with the reported past events. They do not prove the existence of an immaterial soul that migrates intact. Alternative explanation exists, and researchers themselves caution against overreach. The scientific value of these studies is that they identify puzzling, repeatable patterns that merit future investigation. not that they offer definitive metaphysical proof. But what about skeptical and naturalistic explanation? Skeptics propose several natural explanations for reported past life memories. First, cryptomnesia and ordinary memory contamination. A child might have overheard stories or been exposed to information unknowingly, then confabulate it as its own memory. 2. Suggestion and leading questioning. Some interviews risk unintentionally guiding the child towards specific answers. Third, fraud or fabrication. In rare cases, families might fabricate stories for attention or motives. 4. Cultural reinforcement. In societies where rebirth is commonly believed, families and communities may be more likely to interpret statements as part of past life reminiscence. 5th, coincidence and selective matching. With many details and many children, some matches could happen by chance, or researchers might overweight confirmatory evidence. These are not trivial objections. They highlight why extraordinary claims demand rigorous controls and careful replication. Many critics also argue that the reported correlations, even when striking, do not rule out all possible material explanations. But reincarnation also puts philosophical problems. Beyond empirical issues, reincarnation raises hard philosophical questions. What is it that survives death? Is your personality, memories, or character traits reappear in another body? Is that you? For Buddhists, the doctrine of no self complicates things. Rebirth can occur without a persisting soul because personal identity is a causal process, not a substance. For soul-based views, we must explain how the soul stores memory, how it is individuated, and how continuity can be verified. The debates here are rich and intersect metaphysics, philosophy of mind, and cognitive science. But what about near-death experiences? Another related area of study is near-death experiences. Episodes where people report vivid perceptions during life-threatening events. Some ND accounts include feelings of continuity, encounters with deceased persons, or life reviews, but they typically don't describe clear memories of previous lives. Researchers caution against conflating NDEs with reincarnation claims. They are different phenomena, possibly with different explanation, but both feed public interest in life after death topics. What would convince a scientific community that reincarnation is real? Stronger evidence would indicate independently verifiable specific information a subject could have not learned by ordinary means, documented before any investigator contact, coupled with plausible mechanism. Currently, the most intriguing cases are those where a child gives verifiable details that investigator later match to a deceased person and where contamination appears unlikely. Even then, a mechanism is missing. How would memories or identity transfer? Until researchers can close both their evidential and mechanistic gaps, the debate will continue. What about voices from religious, science, and philosophical background? Religious traditions treat reincarnation as a part of larger spiritual map, embedded in ethics and soteriology. Some scientists treat claims as anomalies to be explained within current frameworks. A few researchers take a more open-minded approach and study the data while acknowledging limits. Philosophers press on conceptual questions about personal identity and the nature of consciousness. The conversation is most productive when each side recognizes what it can and cannot answer. Data researchers can gather anomalies and patterns. Philosophers can clarify what would count as identity, and religious thinkers can explain meanings and practice. So, what should a curious listener take away? First, Reincarnation is a multifaceted idea, religious, moral, philosophical, and occasionally empirical. Second, intriguing data from child memory studies deserve careful attention, but they do not by themselves settle the metaphysical question. Third, the debate raises important human questions about continuity, justice, and how we live our lives now. Whether or not the metaphysical thesis is true. Beliefs or skepticism doesn't erase the ethical challenge. What kind of life do we want to live if our actions have deeper consequences? Reincarnation asks us to imagine life as a long arc rather than a single moment. For centuries, it has helped people find meaning, make moral sense of suffering, and frame a path to transformation. For scientists, it offers a set of puzzling reports that push the boundaries of inquiry. For philosophers, it lights up questions about identity and consciousness. Whether you find the idea comforting, implausible, or somewhere in between, the conversation about rebirth is ultimately a conversation about how to live here and now. My name is HK and this is Creative Thoughts Lab. Thank you for connecting with me. If you have reached this far, a sub to the channel would be great. See you in the next episode. Leave your comments on what if you find about past life, or what if you could time travel to your past self. What questions would you ask your past self?